this is Charles Scoble, your Golden Harvest agronomist with your Agronomy in Action Focus Friday podcast here on October the 17th. Let's get a heat unit accumulation update, talk about what I'm seeing in my travels across the area, and discuss ear molds that you too might just be finding in your own fields as you start to pull back those husks and evaluate your upcoming corn harvest. So as far as our current heat unit accumulation, basing that on a planting date of May the 1st in the East Lansing area, we've now accumulated 2,738 heat units, which is another 42 heat units gained this week. But that's versus 109 gained the week previous. So our drying rate is definitely slowing down substantially right now, as it should in the middle of October. Now, in comparison, we are behind only 22 heat units from last year, but ahead 45 heat units versus the 5-year average. Now, if we go south to the Coldwater area, which is similar to that area, northern Indiana, northern Ohio, we're now only 28 heat units behind last year, but ahead by 18 heat units versus the 5-year average. And finally, going north to the Mount Pleasant area, we're only 29 heat units behind last year, but 88 ahead of the 5-year average. Boy, it's definitely starting to feel like October out there. As for my travels this past week, I've had the chance to walk corn plots. I've sorted through some soybean plot data now that it's, nearly all of our soybean plots are harvested, and then visited a few farms for some service calls on some corn that maybe suffered from the late season drought stress more than those who received a few more frequent rains. Now, in walking those corn plots, I was actually somewhat surprised to see the start of some ear molds in multiple fields. Now, with the hot and dry weather we've had for most of the recent few months, mold was probably the last thing on my mind. But sure enough, it's out there. So I thought this might just be a good time to get brushed up on the different ear molds we might be seeing in our own fields, how to identify them from one another, and which ones might cause issues when feeding them to livestock this year. So let's start with Diplodia ear rot. Now that's the one that starts as a white mold at the base of the ear, and it can sometimes cover the entire ear. Now the white moldy kernels will also have kind of raised black bumps on them. Now, development of this is favored by cool, wet weather during grain fill and will cause lighter kernel weight, poor kernel quality, and poor kernel appearance. Now, the good news is that this white colored mold in the ear is not known to cause any harmful mycotoxins. If you do have Diplodia in some cornfields, make sure to adjust the combine settings to kind of help discard those lighter diseased kernels. Also, make sure the grain is quickly dried to keep that disease from spreading in storage. Now, next up is Fusarium ear and kernel rot. Now, this shows up as a white to pinkish fungal growth on the kernels and can also cause kind of this starburst looking symptom on the kernels. Now, this fungal growth typically starts at the tip of the ear and can sometimes enter from hail or insect feeding damage that kind of opens up that husk to infection. Now, this is a very common ear rot disease in corn that can occur under most any weather conditions, but is most severe when weather is warm and dry. So unfortunately, this ear mold can cause mycotoxins that impact both swine and equine. Now, Fusarium-infected grain will also need to be dried quickly for storage. Now, another ear rot to look for is Gibberella ear rot. This mold is very common throughout the Corn Belt. It's distinguished by pinkish to red fungal growth on the tips of the ear. Now, its development is favored by cool, wet weather after pollination and, in severe cases, will affect the entire ear. Silks and husks will sometimes stick to the ear where the disease is severe. Now, this ear mold produces two mycotoxins, the most common of which is DON, and which can negatively affect livestock, especially swine. Now, gibberella infected grain will also need to be dried quickly and stored dry just to limit those storage contamination problems in there. Now, finally, there's Aspergillus ear rot. This one is a concern when weather conditions have been hot and dry. It can rapidly spread during drought conditions with high temperatures. This fungus overwinters on soil debris and infects the kernels through insect damage. Now, spores on the end of the ear are a yellow to olive green color, and you'll see a powdery greenish mold usually between the kernels. Now, Aspergillus produces alpha toxin, which is a carcinogen and can be toxic to livestock in higher concentrations. Now, though I've been seeing primarily fusarium ear rot fields I've scouted, the pressure has been relatively low, and it's not in every hybrid or on every ear. My concern is that some fields and some hybrids might show up with higher levels of this or other ear molds as harvest continues. And if cooler and wetter weather patterns start to prevail, this could become a bigger issue. So, the best plan of action is to get out and check your own fields for this issue and then get those fields harvested and dried as soon as possible. Remember, this is the type of problem that it only gets worse over time. So, folks, as we wrap up this week's Agronomy in Action Focus Friday podcast, let's continue to get out there and walk our fields. Knowing the conditions of our stalks and the conditions of our ears is extremely important in making that decision of harvest order and when to get those fields in the bin before they end up on the ground following that next unexpected wind or rain event that will be arriving in only a matter of time. This is Charles Scoble, your Golden Harvest Agronomist, with your Agronomy in Action Focus Friday. Be safe out there.